Trump tariffs are an unwinnable trade war, and why the film industry overall in Canada and the US is kind of laughing at Trump, just like everybody else in the world. Let's face it, we know that Trump's threats and Trump's position is, not one of common sense generally. We know that Trump likes to make threats and tries to bolster his supporters by infuriating them on different topics. Now, of course, he's taking target at the film and television production industry, and he's proposing the tariffs of 100% on foreign-made films. So let's really take a deep dive into what this means and why it's really not a logical or logistical reality that he can bring forward. We also have to take a look at whether or not Trump sees this as a real national security threat in his powers to initiate tariffs. Let's face it, he has won nothing. He keeps losing in the courts, whether it is in the U.S. courts, until it gets to the Supreme Court, where he basically is playing the judges like puppets there. Or the international courts and different tribunals when it comes to foreign trade. We know that the tariffs are illegal. We know that Congress in the United States has no balls, and they're not holding Donald Trump to account for any of his criminality, any of his illegal treasonous acts. And that is a shame that he continues to get away with it like a little baby throwing a tantrum until he gets his own way. But in a series of statements delivered via the Truth Social platform, of course, President Donald Trump announced a plan to impose a 100% tariff on any and all movies that are made outside of the United States. This is not the first time that he's made these threats, but the stated rationale for this unprecedented protectionist measure was the assertion that the American movie-making business has been stolen from the United States of America by other countries. Just like stealing candy from a baby, he said. This policy, aimed at an industry long considered a crown jewel of the American cultural and economic influence, was framed as a necessary intervention to save a dying sector and repatriate jobs, particularly in California, a state the announcement singled out for its weak and incompetent governor. Once again, I enjoy Governor Newsom's trolling of Trump online. I love it, all of the memes that he's coming out with, very original and very funny. Now, the report that we are going to look at here will argue that the proposed tariff is a policy fundamentally disconnected from economic reality. A thorough analysis of the modern American film industry reveals that it is not actually a victim of international trade, but they are the most dominant global player. The evidence demonstrates that the tariff is logistically unworkable due to the borderless nature of modern film production. It's legally dubious in its application to a digital transmitted service, and in direct violation of long-standing U.S. commitments under international trade laws. Furthermore, the economic consequence of such a policy would be catastrophic, triggering a devastating backlash that would cripple the very industry that he claims that he's trying to protect. The profound disconnect between the policy's premise and the industry's reality suggests its true motivations are not economic, but indeed political. To build this case, this analysis will proceed in 4 parts as we move forward. Part 1 will establish a fact-based portrait of the American film industry, detailing its immense contribution to the domestic economy and its structural dependence on a globally dominant export model. Part 2, we will take a look and deconstruct the immense logistical and legal barriers to the implementation, showing why applying a traditional goods tariff to an intangible multinational service is a practical impossibility. Part 3, we will take a look at that will project the severe economic fallout, including the direct costs that will be felt by the American consumers and near certainty of a crippling trade war sparked by international retaliation. Finally, Part 4, we will examine the political subtext of the proposal, situating it within a documented pattern of weaponizing economic policy for political ends and as a potential diversion from other contemporaneous political challenges. Ultimately, the proposed 100% tariff on foreign-made films stands as a case study in how a misunderstanding of a global industry combined with a desire for political retribution can lead to a proposal that amounts to an act of massive economic self-harm. Now, let's first start with the anatomy of a global juggernaut, the modern American film industry. The foundational premise of the proposed tariff that the American film industry is a beleaguered, dying entity being stolen by foreign competitors and collapses under the weight of economic data. Yes, far from being a victim in need of protection, the U.S. film and television industry is a robust, globally dominant economic force and one of the nation's most successful exports. Its modern structure is not a sign of a weakness, but a strategic adaptation to a globalized marketplace that it overwhelmingly leads. Now, in terms of the domestic economic engine, yes, the film industry and television industry are both cornerstones of the U.S. creative economy, with a reach that extends into every state. According to analytics by the Motion Picture Association, or the MPA, the industry supports a total of 2.32 million American jobs and pays out over $229 billion in annual wages. This economic footprint is not confined to the major studios in California. It's a distributed network of over 122,000 businesses, 92% of which are classified as small businesses, employing fewer than 10 people. These are caterers, electricians, makeup artists and set builders, special effects technicians, to the countless other specialized trades that form the backbone of any production. Now, the economic benefit comes acutely localized when a film or television show shoots on location. A single production can inject as much as $1.3 million per day into a local economy, providing an immediate and substantial boost to local vendors and service providers. This direct stimulus is a coveted prize for states and municipalities across the country. For example, Marvel's Black Panther in Georgia involved over 3,100 local workers who earned more than $26.5 million in wages. While the television series This Is Us contributed over $61.5 million to the California economy. This demonstrates that the industry is not merely a Hollywood phenomenon, but the nationwide economic catalyst, driving investment and employment in communities large and small. When we look at the international lifeline and America's premier cultural export, domestic impact is significant. The financial architecture of the modern American film industry is built on a global foundation. The single most critical fact undermining the protectionist argument is that the international markets are the primary driver of profitability. More than 70% of the total box office revenue for Hollywood films is generated outside of the United States. This is not a recent trend. Experts of the U.S. film and tape rentals have grown exponentially, increased by about 426% between 1986 and 2000, and now far exceed domestic box office receipts. Now, as we talk about film and tape rentals, this includes, of course, streaming and the feeding overseas and outside of the U.S. Consequently, the U.S. film industry is not a victim of unfair trade, but a formidable net exporter. In 2023, American films generated $22.6 billion in exports and produced a trade surplus of $15.3 billion, registering a positive balance of trade with nearly every major market in the world. This economic performance directly contradicts the narrative of an industry being stolen. The industry's global success is so pronounced that American films consistently capture at least half and often more than 2/3 of the total box office receipts in major foreign countries. Now, this international box office success is the engine that powers a film's entire financial life cycle. Theatrical performances are a strong predictor of a film's value in subsequent distribution windows, such as video on demand or VOD, streaming licenses, and television rights. The so-called long tail after markets where studios retain a much larger share of the revenue. Therefore, any distribution of the product in the international theatrical release model does not affect box office numbers. It fundamentally cripples the entire multi-layered profitability structure of a film. Now, when we look at made in the world, that's a reality of the modern film production. The industry's deep reliance on global revenue has logically and necessarily shaped the production model. To maximize financial viability and appeal to the international audiences that are essential to profitability, modern filmmaking has become intrinsically multinational. And it's an endeavor that really reaches and transcends across borders. The concept of a purely American-made blockbuster is, in most cases, an anachronism. An anachronism, or, I probably pronounced it wrong, but anyways, it's late. In any event, international co-productions have become a standard and sophisticated business practice. These are joint ventures where production companies from 2 or more countries collaborate on a film. The model offers crucial benefits. It allows producers to pool financial resources, access government-based incentives and tax concessions from multiple nations, and, of course, critically, it allows the film to qualify as a national production in each of those partner countries. This is helping it to navigate local content quotas and connect with local audiences. This is not a new phenomenon designed to undermine the U.S. Its roots trace back to European spaghetti westerns of the 1950s and 1960s, which were often Spanish-Italian co-productions, which we won't get into in much detail here, but that in itself is a really intriguing story, especially if you look back at, the early Clint Eastwoods and stuff like that. But in any event, the result is a complex global supply chain for a single motion picture. A major U.S. studio film is an assembly of global parts. It's common for Hollywood blockbusters to be filmed in the United Kingdom or here in Canada. And that is so that they can take advantage of generous tax incentives and use visual effects studio in India for post-production work and feature a cast and crew drawn from around the world. As one industry executive noted, a Hollywood animated movie could be outsourced special effects to a studio in India, but the color correction could be done in another country and audio video in a third. This intricate borderless process makes assigning a single country of origin for tariff purposes a practical and administrative fiction. The trend of runaway production is not a story of foreign theft, but of a hyper-competitive global marketplace for production incentives. Foreign countries like Canada, the UK, and Australia offer significant tax credits to large-scale productions. However, this competition is just as fierce within the United States itself. States like Georgia, New Mexico, and Texas have implemented aggressive tax incentive programs to lure film productions away from the traditional hub of Hollywood. That's the reality of it. The rhetoric behind tariff conveniently ignores that this is a domestic issue of state-level competition as much as it is of an international one. The industry challenges are not born of foreign predation, but of complex internal shifts, including the rise of streaming, the consolidation of studio slates around major franchises, and the intense worldwide competition for those production dollars. The U.S. film industry has a global economic footprint, and that should not be, just thrown out the window. When you look at the total jobs supported, directly and indirectly, you're looking at about 2.32 million. When you look at the annual wages, 229 billion. Number of businesses, 122,000, and this is in the U.S. Annual exports of $22.6 billion, according to the statistics available from 2023. A trade surplus of $15.3 billion, and a share of revenue from international markets is about 70%. It's a mission impossible, a logistical and legal quagmire of a film tariff. Even if the tariff were economically justified, a premise disproven by the industry's status as a global export powerhouse, its implementation would face a cascade of insurmountable logistical and legal obstacles. The proposal attempts to apply a 20th century trade tool to a 21st century digital industry. This is creating a series of fundamental contradictions, and when you look at it, it renders it practically unenforceable and legally invalid. Industry executives and trade law experts alike have been left flummoxed by the proposal, recognizing it as a policy that ventures into uncharted and unworkable territory. Now, when we look at the definitional dilemma, what is a foreign-made film? The first and most basic challenge is the impossibility of defining the object of the tariff. A foreign-made film. In an era of global co-productions and multinational supply chains, a film's nationality is not simply a designation. As one trade specialist from the Center for Strategic and International Studies observed, trying to determine if a Mission Impossible movie is American would be a Mission Impossible in itself, given its use of multiple international locations, diverse casts, and complex production arrangements. This ambiguity creates an administrative nightmare. Would the tariff be triggered based on the primary filming location, the nationality of the director or key cast members? Would it be the source of the financing, the location of post-production and visual effects work? Under a plausible interpretation, a quintessentially American blockbuster from a U.S. studio like Marvel's Avengers, which was largely filmed in London, could be classified as foreign and subject to the 100% tariff. Similarly, a Disney animated feature that outsourced a significant portion of its visual effects work to studios in India could also be targeted. Without clear, objective, and legally defensible criteria, any application of the tariff would be arbitrary and ripe for endless legal challenges. The definitional chaos is compounded by the problem of valuation. A 100% tariff must be based on some monetary values, but the proposal offers no clarity on what that would be. Would the tariff be calculated based on the film's total production budget, its worldwide box office revenue, the value of U.S. distribution rights, or the value of specific foreign incentives received? Each method presents enormous practical difficulties. A film's budget is often closely guarded as a commercial secret, while its ultimate box office revenue is unknown at the time of its import. This lack of clear and consistent valuation method makes the tariff not only difficult to administer, but fundamentally it is unworkable. When we look at tariffing the intangible, it's a service, not a steel beam. The proposal's most fundamental flaw is its attempt to treat digitally transmitted services as a physical good. Traditional tariffs are levied on tangible products as they cross a physical border or pass through customs. This model is completely inapplicable to the modern film industry. Theaters no longer receive heavy canisters of 35mm film prints. Instead, they receive encrypted files known as digital cinema packages or DCPs. They're receiving them via satellite or hard drive or online through internet connections. Consumers streaming a movie at home receive it as a data stream. In neither case is there a physical good crossing a border that can be inspected and taxed in the conventional sense. Now, legal and trade experts are in broad agreement that films are a form of intellectual property and are governed under the rules of global trade in services. This is a critical distinction, as services are not subject to tariffs. The United States, in fact, excels in the export of services, running a massive trade surplus of over $275 billion in 2023, a significant portion which is derived from IP licensing and usage fees. Applying a goods-based tariff to a service constitutes a profound category error that has no precedent in the United States trade law. Furthermore, any attempt to impose such a tariff would be blocked by the U.S. courts. The administration has previously invoked laws like the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or the IEEPA, and Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, in which allows tariffs on national security grounds. To impose duties on goods, however, legal challenges to these actions have established important limits. Courts have ruled that the IEEPA does not grant the President the authority to regulate the import or export of informational materials, a category that explicitly includes films. Stretching the definition of national security under Section 232 to cover motion pictures would be a largely tenuous argument that would almost certainly be struck down as an overreach of executive authority. When we look at the violation of international commitments, that again is another issue. Beyond the domestic legal hurdles, the proposed tariff would place the United States in direct violation of its binding international trade commitments, shattering decades of U.S.-led policy. This creates a deep and damaging contradiction, as the U.S. has long positioned itself as the world's foremost champion of a free and open digital marketplace. Since 1998, the member nations of the WTO have maintained a consensus moratorium on imposing customs duties on electronic transmissions. This agreement has been crucial for the growth of the global digital economy. The United States has not only been a party to this moratorium, but has been its most vocal advocate. They are consistently pushing to make the ban on digital tariffs permanent to benefit its world-leading technology and service industries. To unilaterally abandon this position and impose a 100% tariff on a digitally delivered service would be a stunning reversal of long-standing U.S. policy. It would effectively provide a green light for every other nation to impose retaliatory tariffs on the vast ecosystem of American digital exports, from software and video games to music, streaming, and cloud computing services. The policy would also violate specific commitments made under the General Agreement on Trade in Services, also known as GATS. Under GATS, the United States has legally bound itself to provide both market access and national treatment for cross-border audiovisual services. The principle of national treatment is a cornerstone of international trade law, requiring that foreign products and services be treated no less favorably than domestic ones. A 100% tariff applied exclusively to films deemed foreign-made is a textbook case of discriminatory treatment and a clear-cut violation of this binding commitment. The attempt to implement this tariff would not only be a logistical nightmare, but also would be shredding the credibility of the United States in international trade systems with far-reaching consequences. We know that this doesn't really matter to Donald Trump because in his world, he is right and he is the world leader. He thinks that he runs every country and can dictate what they do and how they behave and what terms in which they are going to trade on a global scale. Not acceptable. Now, let's take a look at cooking the golden goose. Yes, that's what Hollywood is. It is a golden goose, the inevitable economic backlash. Now, if implemented, 100% tariff on foreign-made films would trigger a cascade of devastatingly economic consequences, inflicting severe harm on American consumers, domestic industries, and the nation's global economic standing. The policy is a textbook example of protectionism that would not only fail to achieve its stated goals, but would actively destroy the profitability and global dominance of the very industry that Trump says it's purporting to save. It's far from making Hollywood great again. It would be basically hollowing out one of America's most successful export sectors and invite a crippling trade war. There's a consumer cost, the high prices, the less choices. And that's the most immediate and tangible impact of the tariff that would be felt by American consumers. A 100% tariff applied to the point of distribution would be a massive cost that would almost certainly be passed directly on to the ticket-buying public and streaming subscribers. For theatrical releases, this could mean a doubling of ticket prices for any film classified as foreign. A standard $20 movie ticket could soar to $40. A price point that would make cinema going prohibitively expensive for many families and individuals, leading to a sharp decline in theater attendance. We've already seen massive jumps of the cost of going to the theater. Between the ticket prices, the popcorn, the drinks, the other added costs there. It is getting expensive for a family to do that. And by these 100% tariffs to double the ticket price, would have devastating effects on the theaters across the nation. Now, the price shock would extend to the rapidly growing streaming market. Platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Disney Plus, which rely on a deep and diverse library of both domestic and international content, would see their acquisition costs for foreign-made films and series double overnight. This would force them into an untenable position. Either absorb the massive costs, pass them on to consumers through significantly higher subscription fees, or drastically purge their libraries of international content. Now, let's remember that if they have to actually absorb the added costs, they're going to be spending less on domestic productions as well. Simple finance and economics dictate that. The likely outcome would be a combination of all three, resulting in more expensive, less diverse, and less competitive streaming landscapes for American viewers. This tariff would also effectively annihilate the market for independent and international cinema in the United States. While a major blockbuster might be able to weather higher ticket prices, smaller budget art house films, documentaries, and foreign language films would become economically unviable to distribute. The result would be a balkanization of content, a severe narrowing of cultural horizons for American audiences, and the potential collapse of the independent theaters and distributors that specialize in such films. Not sounding very smart in terms of the tariffs now, is it? Now let's take a look at the retaliation playbook. If it was a global trade war on Hollywood, the most dangerous and predictable consequence of the tariff is the certainty of swift and severe international retaliation. Given that over 70% of Hollywood's box office revenue originates from foreign markets, this retaliatory action poses a direct and existential threat to the industry's entire business model. As one analyst aptly warned, this policy is tantamount to cooking the golden goose that's laying the golden eggs. Foreign governments would have a simple and devastatingly effective playbook at their disposal. The most direct response would be the imposition of reciprocal tariffs, slapping a 100% tax on American films imported into their own markets, instantly rendering them uncompetitive. An equally potent tool would be the reimposition of strengthening of screen quotas. These are regulations common in many countries that mandate a certain percentage of theatrical screen time be dictated to domestically produced films. Many nations have relaxed these quotas in recent decades under the principles of free trade, but a protectionist move by the United States could give them every incentive to bring those back, effectively locking Hollywood out of cinemas in critical markets like the European Union and China. The retaliation would have catastrophic impacts on the U.S. economy. It would vaporize the industry's $15.3 billion trade surplus, turning a major export success story into a massive liability. The loss of primary international revenue streams would lead to billions of dollars in lost earnings and threaten thousands of American jobs across the entire production, marketing, and distribution ecosystems. When you look at hollowing out Hollywood, the unintended consequences are there. The long-term systemic effects of the tariff would be just as damaging as the immediate economic shock. The policy would erode America's global influence and inadvertently foster the very international competition that it's meant to suppress. Hollywood is one of the most powerful instruments of American soft power, shaping cultural perceptions and promoting American values and aesthetics worldwide. A trade war that serves and severs the industry's global distribution network would diminish this cultural reach, ceding influence to the rapidly growing and ambitious film industries in countries like China, South Korea, India, and others. By disrupting the global film ecosystem that Hollywood currently dominates, the tariff would create a powerful incentive for other nations to build their own self-sufficient production and distribution infrastructures. This would accelerate the development of competing international hubs, creating a more fragmented and multipolar global film market where Hollywood's preeminence is no longer guaranteed. Tellingly, the American film industry itself, from the major studios to the labor unions, has rejected the tariffs as a solution to its challenges. Groups like IATSE, or the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, which represents behind-the-scenes workers, have acknowledged the pressures of international competition. However, they have advocated for a far more constructive and less destructive policy: the implementation of federal production tax incentives. Such a policy would help level the playing field against the incentives being offered by foreign countries and other U.S. states, encouraging domestic production without dismantling the global business model that is the lifeblood of the industry. Very clear. As we look at part 4 of this episode, the political subtext and weaponizing trade policy. Given that the proposed 100% tariff on foreign-made films is economically illogical and logistically unworkable and legally untenable, its true purpose cannot be found in the realm of sound economic policy. Instead, the motivations behind the proposal are best understood as political. The tariff threat is a performative act of punitive protectionism consistent with a broader pattern of weaponizing the instruments of government to target perceived political adversaries, settle scores, and generate distracting media narratives. Well, we are deconstructing the rhetoric, the stolen industry, or is it a political scapegoat? The central claim that American film industry has been stolen is a fiction. As established in part 1, the industry is a global economic juggernaut that dominates the international box office, maintains a massive trade surplus, and accounts for over 99.6% of the domestic market share. The narrative of a dying industry is a political construct, not an economic reality. The rhetoric used to announce the tariff provides clear clues to its political targeting. The Truth Social posts explicitly and repeatedly single out California with its weak and incompetent governor, as Trump puts it. This specific mention of a state and a governor who are prominent political opponents of Donald Trump strongly suggests that the policy is clearly intended, at least in part, as a punitive measure against perceived bastion of liberal opposition. It recasts a global industry issue as a partisan attack on a blue state. Furthermore, the attempt to justify the tariff on the grounds of national security, claiming foreign film constitute messaging and propaganda, is a political framing designed to expand executive power and demonize cultural products from other nations. This rhetoric seeks to transform a commercial trade dispute into a matter of national defense, a legal pretext the administration has used to impose tariffs on goods like steel and aluminum under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. It's an attempt to place a cultural industry, one known for its frequent criticism of the administration, under the umbrella of a national security threat, thereby justifying extraordinary measures against the industry. It's a pattern of political targeting. The threat against the film industry is not an isolated event, but a clear example of documented governance strategy. The use of federal power to investigate, punish, and intimidate perceived political opponents. This pattern of behavior has been observed across multiple sectors, targeting corporations, media organizations, nonprofits, and individuals who have been critical of Trump and his administration. The concurrent government shutdown serves as a direct and powerful precedent for this type of political retribution. During the shutdown, the Trump administration explicitly froze $26 billion in federal funding for infrastructure and green energy products located in Democratic-leaning states, including New York and California. Administration officials openly linked the freeze to the shutdown and blamed Democratic leaders, making it clear that the levers of federal budget were being used to punish political adversaries. This action establishes a clear and contemporaneous example of using federal policy as a tool of political warfare, lending significant weight to the interpretation that the film tariff is an application of the same playbook to the cultural sector. This fits into a broader strategy described by observers as cultural crackdown, in which institutions associated with liberal viewpoints, including universities, law firms, the media, are subjected to government pressure and investigation. It's political theater, distraction and division. The timing and nature of the tariff announcement also suggests its value as a tool of political theater. The user's query posited that the tariff could be a tactic to deflect attention from other political damaging issues, such as the ongoing government shutdown and the intense public and media focus on Donald Trump's well-documented, multi-decade relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Political analysts have indeed identified such divisionary tactics as a political and potential strategy employed by this administration. A loud, controversial, and easily understood announcement targeting a high-profile cultural war adversary like Hollywood is an effective way to dominate news cycles, shift the public conversation, and energize a political base. The policy's true utility may not lie in its implementation, which is likely impossible, but in its announcement. The rhetoric of a stolen industry, the fight against globalist elites, and the defense of American jobs resonates powerfully with a base animated by cultural grievances and protectionist sentiments. The tariff threat functions as a potential piece of political messaging, a performative act of fighting for the common person against powerful and politically opposed cultural institutions. The ultimate target of this policy may not be the economic practices of foreign nations, but the very idea of an independent cultural sphere that can operate without fear of political retribution. By labeling art it dislikes as propaganda and a national security threat, the administration sends a chilling message that cultural production is subject to political approval, transforming a trade dispute into a fundamental threat to free expression and artistic independence. We're looking at a self-inflicted wound. The proposal to impose a 100% tariff on foreign-made films is a policy built on a foundation of falsehoods. It is an economically illiterate solution to a non-existent problem, a logical and legal nightmare to implement, and a certain path to devastating economic self-harm. The claim that America's film industry is a dying or stolen entity is directly refuted by overwhelming evidence of its global dominance, its status as a premier American export, and its massive trade surplus. The very structure of modern filmmaking, a complex, borderless web of international co-productions, financing, and talent, renders this concept of a film's nationality practically meaningless. And it also makes the application of traditional goods tariffs an administrative impossibility. Furthermore, the tariff would place the United States in direct violation of its own long-standing and legally binding commitments under international trade laws, including the World Trade Organization's moratorium on digital tariffs and the GATS Treaty. The stunning reversal of decades of U.S. policy would not only shatter America's credibility more than it already has been on the world stage, but would also provide a clear justification for other nations to retaliate. The ensuing trade war would be unwinnable for the United States. With over 70% of its revenue derived from international markets, Hollywood's primary profit engine would be crippled by reciprocal tariffs and screen quotas, leading to billions in lost revenue and the loss of thousands of American jobs. American consumers would face higher prices and drastically reduced choices, while one of the nation's most powerful instruments of cultural influence would be severely diminished. Given that the policy is indefensible on economic, legal, and practical grounds, its motivations must be understood as political. The tariff threat is best viewed as a punitive gesture aimed at a state and an industry perceived as a hub of political opposition. It is consistent with a documented pattern of weaponizing the powers of the federal government to punish adversaries, and a performative act of political theater designed to energize a political base and distract from other issues. In conclusion, the proposed 100% tariff on foreign-made films represents an existential threat to one of America's most successful and influential global industries. It is a self-inflicted wound born of a fundamental misunderstanding of the modern creative economy and a willingness to sacrifice American prosperity for political expediency. The policy is not a shield to protect a vulnerable industry, but a wrecking ball aimed at a global champion. We know that Donald Trump and his party, all of his administration, are full of shit. We know that he does nothing in the interest of protecting Americans, unless, of course, those Americans are himself and his billionaire friends. We know that the shutdown of the American government, even though he controls both houses, levels of Congress and the courts or the legal system, he controls everything. But he's using the shutdown to be able to eliminate anything that would piss off the Democrats. That's his goal. He stated it as clear as that on his press releases and his interviews. Eliminating jobs that cannot be brought back. Using the shutdown to remove the vote that would have released the Epstein files, or at least more of them. Donald Trump is in it for himself. For all of those mega morons that think that he is out there to protect them and stand up for them and to make the country great again, guess what? He's got you bent over so hard that it's going to hurt. Because he's screwing you every way, and yet you still don't see it. Trump is not going to be able to bring in this 100% tariff on Hollywood. It's just more bluster, more false threats to distract and take attention away from things that really matter. And that is my take on it. I hope that you agree. I hope that you will share your opinions in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts are. Once again, you've been watching Live Chat with James here at the studios in Vancouver, British Columbia. I appreciate you taking the time to be a part of it. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe, and share with your friends and family. As, of course, that helps to push us up in the algorithms and to get our message out to more people. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via email, direct message, or you can call the studio line at 604-385-5093. Once again, the studio phone line is 1-604-385-5093. Feel free to call. If you are outside of our live hours, you will get a voicemail. You're welcome to leave a message that we will listen to, and we may play on another episode of Live Chat with James. Thanks for tuning in. Take care, and this is our take on Trump and his threatened tariffs. Have a good night, everyone, and thanks for tuning in.